Hello, I'm your host, Jean-Paul Baran, President of Focus on the Family Canada. Welcome to The Thriving Family, a Focus on the Family Canada podcast. This is the space where family, faith, and culture intersect. You can enjoy the Thriving Family podcast ad-free without any interruptions, thanks to generous donors who support our ministry. In this season of the podcast, we're talking about God's full life for you. Along with sound bites on marriage, parenting, and life challenges, we're bringing intimate conversations with leaders from a wide range of ministry backgrounds and life experiences, who have all generously taken the time to share their heart with you. If you like what you hear, be sure to rate the episode wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember to check out each episode notes for related resources and for how to support the Thriving Family podcast. Today, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dave Phillips, a former employee of Focus on the Family Canada. Dave is now an experienced executive mentor and speaker for high-performance CEOs and business leaders across North America. His work covers topics ranging from the boardroom to the bedroom in some of the most challenging and even troubling areas of the leader's life. Dave not only supports CEOs and business leaders, but also their teams to make a greater impact and provide long-term solutions. Those may sound like lofty topics, but in our conversation, Dave and I share freely from our hearts about matters of character, integrity, humility, and purpose. I hope it speaks to your heart as well. Today we're joined by Dave Phillips, just an extraordinary man. And when you hear the bio, I've heard the bio earlier on, one of the highlights for us here at Focus Canada is he's one of us, a past employee. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you, JP. So great to be here with you.
Thanks for taking the time. Dave just flew in last night before this recording from New York City. So he's on a different time zone, and we're just going to get him back to BC time. So just to start it off, Dave, you've written a book called 3 Big Questions and the Purpose Process. Can you share about the story behind that book and the response you've seen since it's been published?
Oh boy, that's a big question. Yeah, it has been a long time in thinking about these concepts and understanding this notion of life purpose and bringing meaning to your life, because it's a very confusing question for people. And, you know, we've all heard the question, what's the purpose for my life? It's actually the wrong question. The question is, how do I live a meaningful life? And to live a meaningful life, I have learned from these thousands of business leaders I've talked to in the last, I'm going to say at least 3 decades. There are at least 3 areas that need to be addressed in order to live a meaningful life. And so I've done my best to understand the concepts, to explain them, and help people have a pathway they can actually take with practical, applied exercises in the book so they can have a meaningful outcome at the end of it that can draw them towards that meaningful life.
Yeah, thanks. I think a lot of us, particularly myself, I struggle what the meaning of life is. And there's a book, famous book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and there's a question there: what's the meaning of life? And the answer is 42. So I'm sure that's not the true theological point of meaning of life, but I did find it funny when I hit the 42 mark of my age and thinking, okay, now I know everything. But I think often, like just as a dad, someone who's employed and a leader in my community, I'd like to say, and a churchgoer, I often think, the meaning of life is to, have a job and raise my family well. But I think a lot of us get the order mixed up. If you can touch into that.
It's a great point. A lot of it has to do with age and stage. Where are you? How old are you? What's your level of maturity, and so on. And so in the book, most people will become very interested in these topics somewhere between 25 and 35. The closer you get to 35, the more you realize the pain associated with not answering them, actually. Because these questions, the 3 questions, are really the questions I think God has put on people's heart to live a satisfying life. And people normally ask the second question first. What's my mission? What do I do? What are my signature strengths? And they actually focus on that. And everybody's kind of an expert, or hopefully they become an expert in what they do well. Even, 2,500 years ago, Aristotle said something that I'll combine with a guy called Martin Seligman who did a bunch of research on happiness. But he said, and this is kind of a reduction of a description of, how people become happy that can withstand really the test of time and stand up to academic rigor now. But this is a description of the happiest people. They have first become the kind of people, know themselves so well, that they naturally engage their signature strengths or the things they do well to make a contribution, but not just any contribution, a contribution that people and culture would consider a good thing. And so if you get those 4 steps right, if you work on your character to become the kind of person who knows himself so well that you just naturally do what you do well, but not just for yourself, but to make a contribution, but not just any contribution, a contribution doing good things, those are actually going to be the most satisfied people. And the book helps people dig into what are those components? Like, how do I have a chance of answering these questions? Because they seem so distant. They seem so far off in the future, and people didn't really even have a chance, right? And so they would come to me first, JP, and they would ask the question, what do I do? What's my mission? What are my strengths? And it was only later that the hunger in their soul would say, oh, why am I doing that? So what's that deeper sense of purpose? And then they would answer that first question. Which was a who question. It was kind of, who am I? The people were asking the first question, who am I? Or the deeper purpose, right? Then they would ask, what's my mission? Then the third question was, what's my vision? To summarize that, people want to know who they are, what they do well, and where they're going. Everybody asks those questions. Everybody's intrigued by them. But we break those into little tiny pieces in our culture that are not connected in a way that I think is helpful.
Yeah, I agree. That's a fascinating way. What comes to my mind is on marriage. That's always on my mind here at Focus on the Family Canada. One of the things we try to thrive on is to help families thrive across our nation and globally. And families are, constantly under spiritual attack. And one of the things as a young person is when I talk to young people who are embarking into marriage, they're thinking of that goal, that end goal of, okay, I need to go to university if that's the case, or get a job. And then I find the love of my life and I get married, and then life will be great. And a lot of times when we do the Hope Restore program, we ask, why are you here? What happened in that journey? And a lot of times it's because the couple never actually understood who they were and what was the purpose of their life, the why of where they're at. If you could expand on that, if you've seen that through your journey as well in marriages.
I certainly have. And when we think about the foundation of the things that are most important in couple relationships, it's who am I, and can I count on you to consistently express that character? And so often we are focusing on the things that we do and our careers and the money that we make, not the character that actually informs all of those things. And so when we consider this understanding of character, I can promise you, in your marriage with Susan and her with you, she wants you to express humility. Always. She doesn't want you to be arrogant. She expects you to be just, to be fair, to be honest, to show mercy, to have faith in her and God. She wants to bring peace and charity and goodness, integrity, grace, hope. She wants all of those things in your relationship. I can promise you there's none of those that she wouldn't want. So why can't we start thinking about marriage as the character qualities that actually inform all of the agreements and disagreements we're going to have, all of the money we'll make, the houses we'll buy? If we don't understand that foundation, that essentially we want to focus on being good people. We want our kids to be good people. Often we focus on our kids getting education and making a lot of money because we want them to be safe.
Yeah.
But the reality is we don't care about any of that stuff if they're not good people.
Yeah.
And so this first question, what's the purpose for my life? It's not a what question, it's a who question. Who am I? What's my character? How do I describe that in a way that's not going to take me 1,000 years? And I can start a meaningful conversation with my spouse, with my children, to develop the standards in our family that are so important and will withstand the test of time.
So many thoughts are coming to my head, particularly in marriage and my own self and my marriage to Susan. When humility isn't there and all the things that you listed, there are times that is not at the forefront of me as in my character. And I am flawed. I am broken. We are all broken individuals. And I know in those times it's a tough season for Susan and I. And it's because I am wrapped up in something else of wanting to do more for her. And the only thing that God wants for me to do is to be an excellent son to him. And the only way to be a good son to my Heavenly Father is to show the characters that he's bestowed on us towards my wife. And when I change it around and put it as the characters like the JP of I want to be on time for church, no excuses, the kids are showing up regardless, or, the house has got to be spotless clean when a guest comes. Those are my own kind of character flaws. And when someone comes to my house, I've never had anyone actually come to our house and say, "Oh, it's really messy." Maybe my mom a little bit on the silly side. She also says I don't eat enough and should, get a little thicker around the waist. But I think all parents are like that, and I'm sure I'll be the same with my two girls. But we've never had anyone come to our house. Oh yeah, it's a real disaster zone. Right. What we often get is, wow, your house, it looks like mine. It's good to see that you guys just have life in your home. But that's not what I'm thinking. And I know at times Susan doesn't think thinks that way as well. But, one of the things we see in strong marriages is when we can just be showing humility to each other. I know I'm going off a little bit, but what humbles me the most of being a dad is when I've actually shown that aspect to my children, where I have been wrong in some way, and not opinion-wise, but I just didn't hear them properly, and maybe I lost my temper. It does happen once in a blue moon. I would like to say I'm glad Susan's not here because she might say it's a little more often than a blue moon, but is going back to my daughters and saying, "I'm sorry." And how can I improve in myself? And that's been a true test of my own character and humility, and hopefully they've seen that. Can you speak into any of that as an example?
Oh, I've been thinking about humility for 35 years. And the reason is because, when I was young, I was an athlete and, I read my own press and thought I was really something. And to be honest, there's a thin line between confidence and arrogance. And I think I crossed that line. And I'm almost embarrassed to tell the story, but I think it was true, right? And what I realized about humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's being mindful of others. It's the beginning of learning. Unless you have humility, you can't really learn anything because you know everything.
Right, yeah. When
I talk to the young, smart business guys and I talk about humility and they say, "Oh yeah, humility, I got that."
Right.
Yeah, if you don't, with humility, if you don't find it, it will find you.
Yes. Yeah, you touch on the sports and you touch on leaders. A lot of times people in leadership or the spotlight or running a huge organizations, they feel like humility is a weakness at points. I can't be humble, I can't be wrong. But let's touch a little bit on, if you had quite a sports element of sport and competition in your life. You've been a member of Canada's national ski team, a stuntman, a professional snow performer, He broke 2 Guinness World Records for water skiing. You've married an Olympic gold medalist in alpine skiing. Just me even reading that, if I was sitting in your seat, I would be like, my ego would start just getting large. And I see you are just like, that doesn't define who you are. I'm sure you are not all the things I've just read. And if you can just tell me a bit of, why that is, why your faith takes such a prominent role, even after reading all those accolades about you.
It's an interesting thing, JP, because those things that are so important to other people are not important to my wife and I. She never wakes up telling me she's about her sport accomplishments, and she's got a long list, longer than mine, for sure. And we are people who we see it as we're people who like to be active, and sometimes you win these things that people want to talk about. But it's really just an expression of who we are as best we can. When I was young, was that true? Probably not. But we're still doing these sports because we love the sports. Water ski because really like to water ski. I'm an athlete, and it's the expression of what I do. But other people are not athletes, and they're going to express in a very different way. We get so caught up in right and wrong and good and bad when it's just not the case. The things that are most important that we all share are these deep character values. Those are the things that cross all of the bridges between any of the things that separate us, whether it's politics or religion or cultural or family background or history, all of those things. These deeper values, these character values, it's a description of the character and the nature of Christ that is really honored by all people everywhere. I mean, a couple of nut bars maybe will argue a little bit, but at the end of the day, everybody agrees that there is a foundation that we need to be more mindful of.
You're absolutely right when you touch on that of the character, and it's in our foundation as Christian individuals, but it's our foundation in human nature. I often will speak to individuals about our ministry and the Christian element of it, and sometimes people kind of don't want to hear about the Christian element piece. But I've never come across somebody when I share of the values that we stand for as a ministry and people of faith. And people actually really buy into it.
Yes.
And they really buy into the family values of respecting each other at home as a husband and a wife, how to raise a family with integrity and character, leading with humility and grace. When you share it that way, almost everyone I've come across has like, tell me more about these values, because I want to know more. This is how I live my life as well. I've sat across rooms or tables where individuals we don't share the same political view, or we don't share the same theological view in any sense, but we share the same view of family values and values of character. And I always find that fascinating, as I believe strongly that the evil one is always trying to break down marriage and break down Christianity and create this huge divide. But when you articulate things where it resonates with somebody else, they are able to really embrace almost everything that Focus on the Family stands for. Sure. They just need to hear it in a different way. One fascinating way to express it is I was speaking with an Indigenous leader, and I was sharing how I believe God, the Creator, created this earth. And he shared with me, and he said, I believe that a creator greater than me created this earth. We didn't share the same definition of who God was. We definitely shared and understood that someone greater than each of us created this magnificent planet that we're on. Sure. And then we were able to really build from that as a conversation of the same values we had in family. And all of that was stemming from taking a posture of humility without me standing there going, well, it's only because of God that this is here. And him standing down from his posture. And what we did was just show grace to each other and we took the evil one and completely like just stomped him out of the conversation, and are able to start really, I would like to say, a good friendship with this individual. My one of the things that you say about it's just who you are for you and your spouse of your DNA of like a sports. I find that also with leaders, where it's just in their DNA of how they lead and how they express themselves, where you have artists that express themselves in a different way. And that's how God has given them a talent and a gift where it just comes almost natural to them. My wife is a school teacher, and what comes naturally to her is patience and grace with grade 4 students. And I often say to her, I don't know how you do it, because I would lose it. I would probably be fired or arrested within a week just because the patience wouldn't be there. And she often laughs and says, that's because God created you in a different way. And God created you in a way where you were able to lead in a different type of aspect of life. And we try to show that with our kids. Can you talk into that a little bit about what it's like at different hats you've seen on people and how they lead with integrity, grace, and humility?
Well, boy, oh boy, there's so many thoughts I have. The first one that comes to mind is a friend of mine's mother, before she passed away, said, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. And the example that we set speaks so deeply, right? In terms of how we actually connect with others at a character level, right? We just do not understand that other people really are watching, especially those people that are close to us. I won't tell you the whole story, but I will tell you that we don't have any Olympic gold medalists or world champions in alpine skiing on the men's side. But on the women's side, at the time I did this little survey, we had 8, and now I think there's 10 or 11. But these 8 Olympic gold medalists, Nancy Green, my wife, Kathy Kreiner, Jerry Sorens, and I think, is Kate Pace on the list. There's a whole series, Lucille Wheeler, Anne Hegdeveit, going back to 1956, right? And so there is a connection between all of them. And when I asked them, what was the one big thing that connected, that made you believe you could do it? They all talked about the example that the people had set before them. It was their parents and coaches, firstly, but then it was, Nancy Green, who a lot of people know. Her husband just passed away, actually, but a lot of people know her. And she said, well, I was rooming with Anne when she won. And to quote Nancy, she washed her underwear in the same sink as I did. And so she thought, why can't I win? And we forget the power of example. But more importantly, the power of character. When you hear people talk about the things that are important to them, they talk about their parents and the example of goodness that their parents set. And it virtually always comes back to these 18 values, roughly. The sense of virtue, and there's, the cardinal virtues are part of that, but there's this list that is so important to know and understand because it creates those foundational conversations.
You touch on the word community in that story, and seeing like the examples of a Olympic medalist washing their clothes by hand. We have this image in society today that those that are at a certain level, everything's taken care of for them by somebody else, and that's definitely not the case, particularly in the story that you shared. The word community, we live in a coming out of an age where community was almost stripped away from us through the pandemic. And we see the ripple effect of what that has, particularly on younger people, where we're at a point where, everything is on your phone these days. And it became like that 2.5 year gap where we were taken away from interactions and community, where it was done only on a phone or a screen, is a huge impact from somebody who's 25 and under, because that's a huge percentage of their lifetime. And they almost go back now. We're almost in a society where that's almost the norm, and we're seeing so much from our counseling line, so much brokenness that's coming in from trauma all the way down to anxiety and depression that we're seeing. Our research is showing that it's come from that 2.5 year gap of not being in community. The importance of being in community, and Scripture teaches us and tells us over and over again how we need to be in community. We see Jesus with his 12 apostles of being the structure of this community and how that has blossomed to where we are now. Sure. Can you touch more about the importance of a community?
Oh boy, human connection. We underestimate the value and the importance of human connection. It is a survival mechanism in our culture. There's so many good examples. That many people will have heard of the research that the National Geographic did on the blue zones. Biggest part of that was human connection. All the work that's being done by Peter Attia and so many of these scientists now are talking about human connection and the problems that occur when there's a break in human connection. And the earlier the break happens, the more problems people are going to have later in life. And so these early stage the importance of family, of community. Robert Putnam is just, wrote the book Bowling Alone many years ago and has just done a Netflix documentary a few years ago called Join or Die. And it's all about community coming together essentially to heal our land. But most importantly, to connect people, so that we'll work together, survive together. If somebody knows you in your community, they're not as likely to steal from you.
Right. Yeah. That's a very good point. Yes. Yeah. We have so many things about community, and an example that comes to me is when we're isolated. What I see it as a couple of years of living in isolation. It's no question when those that are in jail, and one of the punishments is to have complete isolation, and how that breaks your mind. And it's strange for me to kind of understand why we are so pushing to be so driven of being isolated from each other, where it's just so natural for us to be in community and together with people. Now, I understand there are a lot of introverts out there. They are in my family, and they want to be on just time alone. There are plenty of times where I'm like, I need a break. I just need 10 minutes of quiet time. And some people need more than that. And I don't want to discount that in any way. I strongly do believe, though, we need those interactions. The more we have community, and you touched on it so great, is if your neighbor knows you, they're not going to rob you. And we are all living in neighborhoods. And how do we embrace that? And it's tough because it means for a lot getting out of their comfort zone. And it's really a challenge to get out of that comfort zone sometimes.
Yeah, I just read an article in The Atlantic yesterday where they were talking about these small restaurant owners, and they would have seating at their bar. Well, they now have actually closed the seating at the bar and replaced it with pickup stations for delivery people.
Right.
And this is, their business is busy, but nobody's there.
Right. Yeah.
And so people are gravitating to wanting to, eat alone and be in their own space. And you touch on this very important point of what's the balance, right? And the more choice we have, the more freedom we have. Choice and freedom are very difficult forces to manage, especially as it relates to this. So if we have all that freedom, do we intentionally include others in a way that actually builds community? Because all of us actually do have an impact, and even the most introverted person in the world is going to have an impact on 10,000 people during the course of their life. That was a study that somebody actually did at one point. I'm not sure how validated it was, but they make a good point.
It's fascinating when you meet somebody new and that instant connection comes. I see it at church. We go to a fairly large church in the city of Vancouver, and as we commenced going there, it was so easy to be like a fly on the wall. And it took effort not only on our part as a family, but the community that's there to reach out. And once we kind of broke down that stigma of saying hello to a total stranger, There's nothing warmer on a Sunday when we go to church where that total stranger from a few years ago comes up and says, hey, how are you doing? And even when it is a stranger saying, how are you doing? So many times I catch myself, not so much Susan, but myself, is where I will share my life story to a complete stranger and walk away from that conversation feeling so much better. And it's not that I dumped all my problems on them. It's just I was sharing my life, particularly the joy of God that I have in my life with them. Not always evangelizing to somebody, but just sharing like my love for the Lord, my love that I have for my two girls and for Susan. And I walk away and go, wow, that was really awesome. And I always wonder, like, why don't we do more of that?
This notion of human interaction is so critically important, and how we can touch one another in gracious ways will always undervalue. A friend just told me about cutting somebody off in a bad way in traffic. He would say he was transitioning from being an angry young man to grow up, and he said there was 30 stories that changed him. And he said, when I cut this man off, he said that was one of them. He said, because we rolled up to a stoplight after I'd cut this guy off. And he said, I looked across into the car that pulled up beside me that I've just cut this guy off. And he said, it was the largest Chinese man I have ever seen. And the guy motioned to him to roll his passenger's window down. And he thought, fair enough, I got to take my beating. He rolled the window down. And this gentleman in the other car looked over and he said, hey, man, he said, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Huh. And he said, I'm so sorry. I was in a hurry and I kind of cut you off. He says, oh, no, man, we all have bad days. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. So you have a great day.
Wow.
That
must have changed your friend's mindset instantly. Yeah.
Instantly. But it's this picture of grace, of unmerited favor that this guy extended to him. And that was one of the stories he would attribute to changing his life.
Wow.
So how is
that impact from that one person has changed this life, and that person probably doesn't even know that. How
he's telling the story years later.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible.
Well, it is incredible, but also we have this power to give courage, to give love, to give faith to other people. We possess some of these character qualities for others. Like courage. Courage is the beginning of any action. We possess our children's courage. Courage is the beginning of any action, C.S. Lewis would say. And so if we possess somebody else's courage and we hold on to it, well, gosh, they never actually use it. It rots in your pocket. But when you say to one of your daughters, hey, I think you've got this. I think you can do this. Yeah. You are giving them that courage that initiates action. And as people, as parents, as business leaders, as people of faith in the community, it is actually our role to understand that and to give courage to those around us. Because I can promise you, it changes people's lives.
Your stories of giving the courage resonates at every single level for me. It resonates in my role at Focus on the Family on how to give courage within the staff and within our constituents. But not just that. I'm thinking of my wife, Susan, of giving the courage to her grade 4 class. There's what you're saying is not just for one particular individual. It's for everybody out there. And the story of the one person who had the courage to let the person that was cut off, he had to have the courage to say, just checking if you're okay, because he could have said something completely different. As we get to a close, one last question on the courage piece is, you have served on boards and companies in both private and public sectors. And what does it mean for you to live out your faith, both professionally out in the world, in both those sectors? Or do you even see a difference in that and how you lead your faith? Or do you have to? I am assuming you're just Dave Phillips and this is who I am?
Well, sure. But what are the examples that I have? What are the examples that I set? I want to be really mindful of who I am and how I show up in the world, because I'm kind of public and kind of private now. I do a lot of speaking, and the things that I'm speaking about are these very issues of character, of who we are. Because when you work on who you are and you work on your character, that changes what shows up in the world every day. And people see things, these values, these character values are caught, not taught, and we can teach them every day by our simple actions. So often in our communities of faith, we will start by talking about something that people can't relate to, a religious concept or a scripture verse that people have no connection to. But they all have a connection to this starting of character. Mm-hmm. And so when Christ comes along, they go, of course. Dallas Willard, very interesting guy, has passed away now, but he said, and he's talking about spiritual practices or these practicing of these exercises around faith. He said these spiritual disciplines are those things we employ to achieve those things we cannot achieve by direct effort. And so it's a very helpful concept to realize that as we understand character, as we understand the character and the nature of Christ, as we practice that, other things spontaneously occur. You will have success in relationships. You will have success in family. You will have success in business. You will have success in longevity. It all starts, and I know that sounds like dramatic connections, but it is absolutely true.
I believe it fully. I have a lot of stories. We try to get our children to look at what character is. And the only way Susan and I are able to do it is to live it ourselves. And hopefully our kids kind of see that as a sponge. As a believer, I know that I'm accountable to my Savior, Jesus Christ. And all my actions, regardless of who I am, are watched and seen by Him. And when I act out of the character that God has given me, and we have the freedom of will and choice, one of the gifts that God has given us. Sometimes I react before I reflect. And I spend so much of my time trying to reflect before I have a reaction. And when I do that on a consistent basis, not only those that are around me are in a better spot, and generally this happens with those that are the closest to you. And if I react to my family, I'm not showing the love that God shows me. And if I reflect first and then have a conversation, then I'm showing the way God looks at me. And our relationship is that much stronger. Our relationship as a husband and spouse is just that much deeper. I often hear Susan will say, "Thank you for listening." Not a natural trait of mine, especially as a husband, to listen. But when I hear that, I'm like, I say thank you to God, saying, like, giving me that the patience of reflecting. And then in just my role is how to interact with other individuals. They might be something might have happened in their day. I don't know what their commute was on that day to wherever we're meeting for coffee or in a meeting. They might have really a hard day. And to show grace and love and the Spirit of the Lord to them in everything I do, even so I've had a bad day, could have had a bad day. The encounter, regardless of what it is that much more enriching.
Yeah.
Rather than coming in with my own baggage where the person doesn't even know anything about. That's not fair to them. This has been a fascinating conversation. I feel like we could go on for hours. I really am grateful for your time. For our listeners, we will provide a link for Dave's book if anyone wants to go deeper into that. And Dave, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Great to hang out with you again, JP, and I'll look forward to the next time we have a chance to do this.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Dave and that you found something that resonated with your heart. If you wish to talk about this further, or if it brought up something that you would like to talk through, you can have a free one-time consultation with one of our registered counselors at Focus on the Family Canada over the phone. Give us a call at 1-800-661-9800 to request a consult. It's our gift to you. Thanks for listening to today's episode of The Thriving Family, a podcast from Focus on the Family Canada. If you like this episode, please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to subscribe. If you feel led, you can make a donation at focusonthefamily.ca/podcast giving, or find the link in the episode notes. This program is available ad-free because of the generosity of our donors. Most importantly, remember that we are here for you and your family.